Welcome back, Trollomaniacs, and today we're talking about the PlayStation 2 because the PlayStation 2 turns 20 years old a little bit later this year. And with that, there is a huge library of games. You would expect the greatest selling console of all time to have a huge library. But like any gaming console, there's always games that are a little more expensive, a little more rare, a little more collectible. Well, today I want to talk about 5 games on the PlayStation 2 that are definitely rare, definitely collectible, and will probably require a little extra of that lunch money to get a hold of them. Stick around, let's take a look. Alright, so just to make sure, these are the North American releases, because regionally there's different games that are more rare and less rare, so we're going with North America. With that, the first game up is Rule of Rose, no surprise here. Released in the fall of 2006, Rule of Rose got a Metacritic score of 59. Not fantastic. This game takes place in 1930s Europe, and the protagonist is a 19-year-old named Jennifer, who early in the game has a series of unfortunate events that lead to her jumping aboard a Zeppelin, or being thrown in a Zeppelin, I should say, and unfortunately, like all survival horror games, things are not looking up. This Zeppelin is ran by a group of what I would consider like, imagine like a feminist rally and like the children of the corn offspring come together and they're running a Zeppelin. I mean, things are not good here, all right? So with that being said, the Red Crayon Aristocrats are a group of young girls who run this Zeppelin. And even though there's adults present, it doesn't matter. They don't really do anything. This is a very much a coming-of-age kind of survival psychological horror game. And right off the bat, Europe called this a moral panic. They said there was things like abuse, child abuse. They said there was rape. And because of those accusations, that immediately turned people off to this game. And this game does have a lot of really deep and heavy things behind it, but those might be implied during the game, but they're not part of the game. They're not in cutscenes, they're not showing stuff like that. I mean, even by today's standards, that would be not good. Like, there are some heavy things though, like I said. Things like animal abuse, death, addiction, social inequality, peer pressure, it's all here. This is like Silent Hill and Mean Girls all tied up into a beautiful little bow. These girls are looking for sacrifices, they want you to serve them. I mean, you are literally just under duress the entire game. And not only are you under duress the whole time from these cruel, pretty much absolute bags of these girls, but you're also doing it pretty much alone. You have one friend, and it's a dog named Brown. Other than that, good luck. The pacing, the story, the music were all really, really well reviewed, but the gameplay is typically where this one lets you down. Because of negativity around this game, it never took off, and is now one of the most collectible games in North America. The next game up is another survival horror game made by our good friends at From Software, known for the Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro games, but they were pumping out games on the PS2, and rare ones apparently. Quan was released in December of 2004, and like Rule of Rose, got a Metacritic score of 57, so again, not great. These rare games are not always worth playing if, you know, you're looking for the great tight controls. Pacing, story, cinematic feel, it's all there, but again, like the old Resident Evil games, some of these classics, the controls are a little bit clunky. We find ourselves in another survival horror scenario, but this one takes place in ancient Japan, and you actually have 3 protagonists, 3 female protagonists that you play as throughout the game, and you have to explore a Japanese manor. Now, of course, you wouldn't do this during the day because, you know, video games. You're going to go in at nighttime, you're going to fight off some undead creatures, and you're going to try to survive. Now, this game didn't have the negative press like Rule of Rose before. This game just got a really limited release outside of Japan, which made it one of the rarest and most expensive games. You want to make sure in this game you don't run because you're going to get fatigued, you're going to get tired, you're going to attract monsters, and that's part of the problem with this game is that you just can't really rush yourself through it or you're going to start fainting and getting crazy, which always makes me laugh. It's like, under no circumstance do you go blind like in this game. I mean, literally, the screen starts like darkening if you start getting tired. I mean, I've never ran so hard that I'm blinded or been so scared by monsters that I'm blinded. Could you imagine that? Just running around and all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, you're scared and you're just looking for a cane? I mean, come on. Anyway, I digress. What I'm saying is this game has some great feel to it, but there's also a few things that just make it really, really rough to play through it. This one I saw locally for like $280 at a local game store. Now again, I don't know the prices on these, I don't care. All I know is I don't have them because they're expensive. Well, we might as well stick with survival horror games, and we're going to move on to one that was a holy grail item for me up until just recently when my good old buddy Chronic Spartan Gaming sent me a sealed PAL copy, and that is Haunting Ground. Now here's the deal. The PAL copies are not as rare. They're actually pretty inexpensive, but for me I got a modded PS2 so I can play it. So with that being said, Haunting Ground is another survival horror game with a Metacritic score of 67, so at least it's a little bit better, but again, it's another rare game. This was made by Capcom, and people call it a spiritual successor to the Clock Tower series. I think Clock Tower 3 was one of the last ones, so this is like supposed to be the next game after that. Kind of has the same feel. Once again, you take up the reins as a female protagonist named Fiona, who starts off in a really precarious situation. You get in a car accident, you wake up, you're in the basement, and you are in a cage. This is like Buffalo Bill status right here. Could you imagine waking up in the basement of like a castle and being caged? But the weird thing is the cage is unlocked. But again, much like Rule of Rose, you are not 100% on your own. You do have a buddy who is a canine companion who hangs out with you. And fortunately, you've got that canine companion because your offense is limited as Fiona. And by limited, I mean not a lot. You got like a tackle, you got a kick. Fiona's more of like a defense wins championships kind of lady, if you know what I mean. But luckily, with a canine companion like Huey, who needs the offense? There's a few interesting gameplay mechanics attached to it because as the, protector of Huey and he's the protector of you, you can actually tell him what to do and then he'll attack, he'll find things, he'll warn you. But it starts off with him not being real obedient. You kind of have to grow this relationship throughout the game. And as you grow with him, he listens and becomes more obedient. It becomes way more helpful. So that's kind of cool. But again, much like the previous two games, people love the cinematic feel. They love the storyline. The pacing isn't bad, but some of the gameplay mechanics are a little bit repetitive and they just don't always hold up. And that's the case with this game. But Haunting Ground still has a really good following, and it's still a really cool survival horror game. And the reason this one's rare, there's not really any major reasons. It's just one of those games that didn't take off when it came out, even though it's a major Capcom release, and the price has just kind of stayed up. So Haunting Ground, if you can play it on a PAL, get the PAL version because it's much, much cheaper. But if not, this might be one of your holy grail items as well. Alright, finally we're getting to a non-survival horror game, and we're going to get right into it. It's part of that Dot Hack series, and it's the last one. It's Dot Hack Quarantine, which is part 4. Now, if you haven't played the first 3, you can't really jump into part 4 because they're all one gigantic story. But if you haven't played the series, start at number 1, and then you'll realize you are playing a game within a game. It's like Inception before Inception was cool. And much like World of Warcraft in real life, you play in a video game, an MMO called The World, which is... You couldn't come up with a better name for an online fictional fantasy role-playing game. In your game, you just call it The World. Anyway, it doesn't really make a difference. What happens though is there is a computer virus that wipes out the internet for the entire Earth. So the Earth is wiped out of internet, and when it comes back on 2 years later, the world, the name of the game, The World, I'm going to call the Earth what we actually live on, and the world is a video game. The World is the first video game released, and it's a massive hit. Everybody's addicted to it, literally like World of Warcraft, and it becomes the most popular game of all time. But users start becoming comatose. And now, your job as the protagonist, Kite, is to figure out what's causing this, to try to solve this mystery. And it's a massive RPG that spans many games. And like I said, you really gotta start at the beginning. I don't even have time to go through the whole storyline because it's convoluted, it's crazy, it's wild, but it's interesting to say the least. But it's a turn-based combat system, and really there's not a major reason why Dot Hack Part 4 is that rare. I think part of it is because it's the last game in a series, and if you have 1 and 2 and 3, you always want to complete your trifecta, your quadfecta, whatever it's called, all your 4 quadrants of gaming. And so I think that's part of the reason is that you want to have every game in the collection. And so the last one is probably the hardest one to usually get. Not always the case, but in this case, I think it is. And that's probably why the prices for this and the rarity has gone up over years. This does get a pretty good Metacritic score. The series itself has like 70 to 75 through all 4 games. So it's actually a pretty good game. I've heard it held up. I've only played it when I was a kid, and I think I haven't played it. My buddy had it, and I was playing it at his house. It wasn't really a game I got into, but if you're a big RPG fan, this is definitely one to maybe go take a look at, especially if you want a game that's going to take up some time, especially 4 of them. All right, the fifth and final game on here, we're finishing with a game that's pretty rare as it is, but there's something about it that makes it even more rare because of one simple change. And we're talking about Xenosaga 3. Now, it sells for a pretty decent amount just as it is, but if you find a version of Xenosaga 3 with the holographic cover, you know, the one that kind of changes as you turn it, then you have one of the rarest games in PlayStation 2. I believe originally it was like a Best Buy exclusive possibly, but then other retailers had a copy of it. It's hard to actually confirm that, but what I can confirm is that the holographic copy of this game, just because of the cover, no gameplay tweaks or anything, makes it one of the rarest. And it also happens to be one of the highest Metacritic scores for these rare games at 81. This game was released in 2006, and this is the final game in the trilogy, and it continues this RPG from the first two releases. Much like Dot Hack, this game is a massive sci-fi universe that spans galaxies, it spans planets, it spans a whole bunch of lore that would be really hard to explain it all, especially jumping into the third and final game. But even though this is the third and final game, we know that Xenoblade Chronicles, the remake, is coming out this year, so the Xenosaga itself is not dead. There's still a bunch of games you can play, especially with the Switch coming out, and it's just one of those series that has a bunch of different spin-offs and games, but if you want to play the original trilogy, this one is going to cost you a few doll hairs to pick it up. And again, that's the reason it's rare. There's not like a real answer in terms of like its limited release, other than the holographic part, but even the game itself is a little spendy for just a plain PlayStation 2 game. But if you have it and you want to finish your trifecta of collecting, then hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Alright gamers, that's the first video in this 20-year anniversary of PlayStation 2. What do you think of those rare games? Any of them on your bucket list? Any of them you ever played? They're a little hard to get a hold of. Me, I got a little bit of a modded PS2, so I can get my hands on most of these games pretty easy. But that doesn't mean I have a physical copy of them, because we're talking quite a few $100s to get this collection of 5 games. Anyway, with that being said, I want to say thank you to my buddy Chronic Spartan for sending me Haunting Ground. Totally appreciate it, man. You are rad. If you haven't met Chronic Spartan or seen his channel, you've got to check it out. With that being said, guys, keep trolling, keep rolling. We'll see you next week.